Hi, this is Lazarus Recovery YouTube, and my name's Chuck, and I'm going to introduce a new series. What I'm going to do is, with any luck, I'm going to try to get references down below. I think you can do that, of books. So there'll be some down there. Press the link, it'll take you to Amazon or something like that. It'll show you the books that I be teaching out of. But I've read this and worked with this and taught this sometimes, and it's really good stuff. This isn't about the steps. This is about boundaries, and this whole series is going to be boundaries. I might see if I can get my friend John, who's run family groups, to come in and do some sort of discussions on it and stuff like that. But for right now, I'm just going to introduce you to the concept. And I might stagger a little bit because, I understand it from my own experience. But, boundaries is an interesting thing. And I know that I'm talking to people in recovery, but I'm also talking to people in recovery that are Christians. And I'm also probably talking to people who are Christians. And we have a tendency to stumble into mires over this stuff, over boundaries. A lot of times, addicts and alcoholics and people in recovery get themselves in really, really, really messed up relationships. And you know what it is? You know what can tell you whether you're in a messed up relationship? Boundaries. Boundaries can tell you. It's like you're on a road, and there's signs on the side of the road that say watch out, bending curve, or watch out this and that. And there's guardrails sometimes. In some places there's no guardrails, and it's scary. I lived and drove. Let us say I drove. I should have been driving. But in California, there's a lot of places where they don't have guardrails, and they have windy roads. And there was one particular place coming down into Palma Valley, and you come over a flat spot and you're going fast, come down a hill, and then all of a sudden it takes a hard left turn, a 90-degree left turn. There's a little bit of pull out straight ahead of you, and then it just drops for like 100 feet. No guardrails, no nothing. It's just like, and I drove that drunk sometimes, and luckily I was smart enough. I was like being really careful because I knew that was there, and I didn't want to run off the road into the ditch, because that wasn't a ditch. That was like you're falling off a cliff, and that's a little bit what boundaries is about. Boundaries are guardrails. And a lot of times we're the ones that have to put up the guardrails. If we don't, then, we are either going to drive off the road, or somebody else is going to set up a campsite on the road. And, we can't get by because the person is camping on the road. So our lives are like that. We get into relationships that have absolutely crappy boundaries. And unfortunately, addicts have horrendous boundaries, absolutely horrendous boundaries, for a number of different reasons. They don't want to say no because they want to leverage the other person to break their boundaries. In other words, most addicts, destroy the boundaries of their parents and their loved ones. They destroy relationships because they don't respect the boundaries of people that love them. So they need it. They have to leverage those people. So they just destroy their boundaries. They just continually take advantage, and then they're just mystified when the people just say no. The no is the guardrail, and belatedly people in your life realize they have to put up a guardrail against the foolishness that's going on in your addiction. So you're like in deep resentment over people that turned their back on you. Chances are that you drove over them 50 times. Your tire marks are all over their life. You rode over them, you drove over them, you completely destroyed any trust. You lied to them, cheated, steal, did the whole thing. Now, there's two boundaries problems there. The first boundary problem is yours. You didn't respect that they were independent human beings, and they weren't put in life to enable your foolishness. You had bad boundaries because you took advantage of them because they were your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. You took advantage of them because of that relationship, and you ran over them, and then you backed up and ran over them again, and you backed up and ran over them again, and then you got a resentment because they got up and said, no, I can't do it anymore. That is bad boundaries in every side. Your bad boundaries because you ran over them, and their bad boundaries because they didn't say no and remove themselves from a situation and say, no, you take care of your business and I'll take care of my business. But you say, well, that's not the way it works. Where's your Christian love? Sometimes no is the biggest Christian love you can have, and that's what boundaries are about. It's about guardrails. It's about respecting the rules of the road emotionally and physically. That's what boundaries are about. And you need to start thinking about boundaries. We'll talk about them. This is just an introduction. But if you're an addict, chances are, if you've been in an active addiction, you have completely run over other people's boundaries, and maybe you're drinking and using because somebody ran over your boundaries. A lot of people in addiction got abused, physically, emotionally, sexually, and that's a breach of boundaries. Nobody has the right to come into your life and run over your sexual boundaries. Nobody has that right. But people take that right, especially if you're little. They'll run over those boundaries because perhaps when they were kids, somebody else ran over their boundaries and made it sort of okay for them to do it to the next generation. But just because somebody got away with it doesn't mean that it doesn't leave a mark. Part of getting sober is realizing and starting to construct good, healthy boundaries. And we'll talk about it. Good, healthy boundaries are, where am I and where do I begin and end? And what do I have? What rights do I have inside my boundaries? And what demands do I have on inside my boundaries? In other words, we have the right inside our boundary not to get hurt or abused or anything like that. We can say no to people inside our boundaries. This is my life. No, you don't have a right to do that. The other thing is I have the responsibility to set boundaries and say no to people when they're coming into my space. But also inside my life, inside the boundaries of my life, I hold responsibilities. Inside my life, I'm responsible to take care of my own business. I can't say, oh, poor me, come in here, good Christian, and take my responsibility away from me. That's crappy boundaries. That's absolutely disgusting boundaries. And you know what? What we do is, the church is full of just absolutely awful boundaries. We got people who play broken and with signs out say, fix me, fix me, fix me, fix me. I'm going to screw you, but fix me, fix me, fix me. And then we have Christians on the outside that say, no, I'm going to come in and fix you. I'm going to 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 come into your yard and I'm going to order your life the way I want it to be ordered, and you're going to say thank you. And you're going to become my pet project. Nobody's a pet project of anybody. Christians are especially good at that. Look at me, I'm following Jesus and tampering with 10 million people's lives. You never ask them permission. You just manipulated them so that you could get your jollies off, making them better. But on the other hand, the people that are getting helped are inviting Christians into their territory to help them. But they don't want help. They want somebody to take over their responsibilities. You know, some people are broken and they need a little bit of help. But you got to respect the boundaries, you know. It takes wisdom to understand what are you doing to help them, and what do you do? Are you hurting them more than you're helping them? The Boundaries books talk about that. They talk about the difference between, loads. In other words, things that biblically we're supposed to help people with, and just stuff that we're responsible for, just work that we're individually supposed to take care of. So this is an introduction to boundaries. And I've just talked a little bit about it, and I want you to think about it, comment below. I'm sure I'll get a lot of comments below. You rotten heathen Christian bugger you. I'm going to say some things that are going to really piss some people off. And I'm going to say some things that are going to make people hopeful. But we don't have to live for other people in that sense. We have the right to our responsibilities and our safety inside of our boundaries. We have the right to say no to people. Just no. Don't do that. We have the right to invite people in and say, hey, but we really shouldn't have people in there rescuing us from stuff that is really our responsibility to take care of. You're saying, why should I bother with boundaries? Well, if you're in recovery, chances are there's a whole bunch of boundary issues. And you say, what's boundary issues? Boundary issues are stuff where we're either breaking down the guardrails of other people's lives and coming in there to control them, or we're breaking down our own boundaries and inviting people in to take away our responsibility to do our own thing. Mostly people, Christians particularly, have crappy boundaries. They think it's very Christian to come into people's lives and manage them. You're not doing anybody any. I'm codependent on a whole bunch of things. I have a tendency to want to rescue people, and if you're in recovery, all you have to do is learn about boundaries, and you're going to realize that there's a lot of relationships in recovery that are just really not very healthy. The boundaries are crappy, and they either got to work it out or they break up. And then what happens is that people in recovery repeat the same thing over and again. I know people, I'm 44 years sober. I got sober in AA, and I've been in the church for a long time. And you know what a secret is? People have a tendency to do the same damn thing over and over and over again and not learn. It's amazing, good spirit-filled Christians doing the same damn thing over and over and over again. And people in a program, oh my God, you say, oh, they're sober 40 years. Yeah, sober 40 years. But everybody knows that they're serial in some of the stuff they do. It's not good. And this isn't just like subtle boundaries thing. This is like outrageous, ethical, moral types of failures, which are basically just boundaries issues writ large. You don't have the right to go outside the marriage and have a lady on the outside. You just don't have. It's morally not good, but boundary-wise, it's terrible. Because if you're married, there's a boundary, there's an expectation. But if you're serial about your adultery, then it's very hard to say I'm a wonderful person, because that doesn't work, because you're not a wonderful person. you don't respect the other people, you don't respect the person you're in adultery with, and you don't respect your spouse who you're in adultery against. Now if you're not married and you're in a program and you're sleeping around, gee, I wonder why those relationships don't last. If you talk to people in a program in the early days, I had one guy who remained nameless. He went to Billy Graham crusade and he got saved. He got saved, and then he wanted to go to. Ran a Bible study afterwards, and he came to the Bible study and he lasted a week. 1 week. Because we happened to stumble on a biblical scripture that said, you can't screw around. And that was the end of it for him. Because he was prolific at chasing women. I mean, he was known for it in the program. I mean, it was just, that's who he was. He was prolific. I mean, he had physical relationships that last 2 weeks. He had relationships, multiple relationships running in parallel. And as soon as he saw a biblical thing about it, he just ran away from God, because that was who he was. That was the way he rolled. In other words, he was a drunk on the highway, and all he did was drive drunk and run over the guardrails and run over people, and then come back and do it again with somebody else. He was like a drunk driver on a highway, leaving a chain of relationships broken behind him, and figured that as long as he kept ahead of it, as long as they were behind him, it was okay. And he didn't want any biblical person saying that he couldn't do that. In other words, he was a serial boundary breaker. He was a serial person that didn't respect anybody's boundaries, as long as he got what he wanted. And he was a nice guy. I mean, he was a nice guy, except for being prolific about this. He was a reasonably nice guy. Good sobriety, as in going to meetings, stuff like that. But as a moral human being, it was horrid. And I've seen that in AA, and I've seen it in the church. Long-term sobriety, but long-term serial rubbish. In other words, they managed to keep the facade up. And the boundaries were just absolutely horrid. I know people with serial adulterers, and that's just, they cheated. And the decision was made, for the kids that the wife wasn't going to call that down. So what you had was you had a sort of an agreement. The appearance of the marriage was more important than the reality of the marriage. Okay, that's a decision. That's cool. I don't have a problem with that. But you got two people that are run down with that. The damage of that boundary breaking is not just a one-off. It leaves a mark. It's just, you can't break boundaries and run over people and not have it leave a mark. And that mark is a habit. They say a hurt habit or hang-up in CR. And that leaves a mark. And a lot of times Christians, as long as they don't get outed, are going to go on for years doing that. And everything looks great on the inside, but there's this trail of stuff behind them. All these broken boundaries and hurt feelings and stuff like that. And all that doesn't go away. It just leaves a trail of wreckage that the Lord has to watch all the time. So that's why it's important to understand about boundaries, so you're not You're not you're not like a drunk on a highway, driving along without consequence, but there's this trail of brokenness behind us. We've been breaking boundaries of people and hurting ourselves and other people, but we're still going, we're still moving, we're protecting our reputation. But God looks at the thing, and all he sees is this like a highway of things. I just passed a thing, an accident or whatever it was, on the other side of the road, and there were cars strewn for 1.5 miles. There were cops every place. There were cops, like 1 mile apart. It looked like somebody did a Chinese fire drill. Forgive me, I don't know whether that's racist or not. But a whole long, pinball machine of things down the road. For 1 mile, there were cars pulled over, people out talking and stuff like that. That's what life is for some people. They look good on the outside, but God looks at it and he sees this trail of wreckage that's buried and taken care of. They repair the boundaries on the side of the road and everything is cool. But it's the invisible hurts, habits, and hang-ups that from all this boundary breaking and foolishness and stupidity that leaves marks. And the funny thing is, the adults make it through their entire life, and the kids are the ones that have to pick up the pieces. The kids are the ones that have to go to therapy. The kids are the ones that have to deal with the rotten boundaries that have been executed in front of them by their parents. So if you're in recovery and you're one of these people that just is driving all over the place, maybe it's time to look and say, hey, maybe I need a good shepherd. Maybe I need somebody to straighten out the thing, and I can make amends and I can clean things up and as best as I can, and I can leave the place a better place. I can own up to my responsibilities. I can own my own property, my own efforts, and my own thing. And I can be a good moral person. Even if we make mistakes, if we fess up and we clean it up, God looks at us as a moral person, and our kids will look at us as a moral person. But you got to get to know about the boundaries thing, because a lot of times we ignore that stuff. We just drive drunk through life, ravaging people, and we don't know because we move so fast. We just leave the broken people behind us and we just keep on rolling. In recovery, that's a lot of what it is. A lot of people in long-term recovery, have a name, but they have wreckage behind them. It's time for them to have a come to Jesus moment. It's time for them to really understand about the boundaries thing. This is Lazarus Recovery. YouTube is about recovery, but Christian recovery, secular recovery, and the interface between faith, Christian morality, and the recovery community.